Welcome to the user setup, which will comprise 9% of the Salesforce exam. We're going to be talking about two key elements. The first one is identifying the steps to setting up and maintaining a user in Salesforce. In Salesforce, every user is identified by a username, a password, and a single profile. The profile determines what tasks users can perform and what data they can see and what they can do with that data. Remember, there is a difference between a Salesforce account and a Salesforce profile. Anyone who can log into Salesforce is likely to have a Salesforce account. However, each account has a profile, and the profile is really linked to the role and the access that that person has. For example, well, you may have an organization with 100 people. You may have a marketing department, and the marketing department has a marketing profile, and that profile allows them to see, access, and work with data that is related to their role. However, they may not be able to see operational profile data. And so, while they all have the Salesforce accounts, their profiles limit or grant them access to perform certain tasks. When creating a user in Salesforce, you must have a last name, an email, a username, and a user license profile. And the profile settings control access to applications and objects. I'll explain the difference between the two in a moment. And we use sharing features to control these access. So when you think about sharing a Google document, for example, and sharing it publicly or sharing it privately, these are the same features that apply in the Salesforce world. I'm going to talk a little bit about the maximum Salesforce users per edition. So what we have is just a reminder about what profile settings do. And then we have the different Salesforce editions. We have contact managers, groups, professionals, enterprise, unlimited, and developer. And contact manager, you can have 5 users per edition, and each user may have a different Salesforce profile. And the group Salesforce edition can have 5, but the professional, enterprise, and unlimited actually have unlimited numbers of users. And often this is something that you will need to be able to distinguish in the exam itself. So let's look at a second element of the user setup, which is troubleshooting common access and visibility issues. So these are some questions to consider as you're troubleshooting visibility and access issues. Number 1, does this profile have any login restrictions? Number 2, does the user IP address in the organizations in a trusted range? Only users with an active IP address can log in. Okay? In other words, their IP address must be active by the administrator. The administrator has to actually go in and tick the box that says this is an active IP address. They're considered activated if the IP address falls within trusted IP ranges, and that's something that the administrator actually sets. Whether are they a previously activated user? Do they have their cookies enabled? Salesforce uses the cookies, 1, to track their usage of Salesforce to provide a better service, and 2, they use cookies to track the IP address and all these other pieces, which are useful. So if you've gone through these pieces and you're still having access or visibility issues, it's important to ask the question whether this IP address has been activated before. Sometimes people use the same IP address, but the IP address has been deactivated, and so it might need to be reactivated. And does the user's web browser have valid cookies from Salesforce? As I mentioned earlier, cookies help Salesforce provide a better service to us. Continuing on the theme of troubleshooting user access and visibility issues, these are 2 elements that you need to think about. The first one is login hours or login access. The second one is visibility. And when we talk about access, often this is a login issue if this is on a front-end user. So it's important to think about login access for specific profiles and how long they can access that information for. I'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide. The second thing is to make sure that the login IP ranges for specific profiles are activated. Very, very important. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about organization-based login hours. Right, that's something that you hear. It's actually a misconception. There is no such thing as organization-based login hours, but there is such a thing as a company profile and a business hour. So in the exam, it might ask you whether there is such a thing as organization-based login hours, and that's a trick question because they don't exist. Okay, so what happens when a profile is logged in and the login hour passes? So the administrator will often set up parameters for how long people can use Salesforce for before Salesforce automatically logs people out. And this is to protect information, confidentiality, and the like. So if you change a user's email address and generate a new password, a confirmation message will be sent to the new email address that you entered. Okay? So this is if someone can't access their profile. You can actually change their email address, if it's the email address that's the issue, and you can generate a new password for them. However, the user must click the link provided in that message for the new email address to take effect. In other words, what generally happens is people can forget their passwords, or they can log into Salesforce using a different email address. Once you change that email address, Salesforce automatically sends you an email. You need to click on that email for Salesforce to then update from the old email to the new email, or create a new username. Remember, in Salesforce, the username is an email address. Okay, if you change a username, the login is sent, as I've just explained, and it's in that process that the user becomes activated in Salesforce. The administrator then goes in and changes the profile settings and sets up the parameters that allows the user to then view, access, and use the information allocated to them. So this is the really critical information that's necessary for the user setup part of your Salesforce exam.